There's a big storm blowing in. I think the lights just flickered, so this could get real interesting. La tormenta. Thank you, Cindy. Now I'm just going to hassle you with Spanish questions before class starts. There's Cooper. Okay. All right. Gross. It's like this wad of questionable-looking paper towels keeping the door open. And it may be keeping it open permanently. Ew, gross. What? Yeah. I forgot to bring my WD-40 today to oil this up. It'll happen, though. All right, we'll let that happen 4 or 5 times for the people who come in late. You made it back! A pretty good-sized number of you, too. That's great. All right, so week 2. So today we're going to look at the first major project. Okay. New rule, when you come in, you have to nurse the door closed. So we're going to... Come on in. Right? We need like some kind of a song, like a bagpipe song to go along with that thing as it kind of drones. Close. Okay. So today we're going to look at the first major project. If you are a... go-getter of a student and you've already read the first major project, surprise, I changed it this morning. So that'll teach you about getting all ambitious. Let's see. Just a little bit. I know, mood lighting. All right, and then we'll do the last bit of HTML historical stuff, then we'll get into the current stuff. We'll look a little bit about Git and remotes, and then we'll do what we can with syntax and fundamentals from a contemporary perspective and start talking about semantics and all that. But first, so we can kind of get a roadmap and some vocab for where we're going, let's look at this first project description. Feels like time slows down too, right? Like, Finally watched Doctor Strange this weekend. Somehow that fits in that world. I don't know. Okay, so project 1 is valid, responsive, ready HTML. Okay, so for this project, you will create at least 3 richly structured HTML pages that will form the foundation of your professional web presence. Okay, one of the pages must be your professional resume. One of my favorite things in the world to help people mark up is a resume. I'll try to hold my excitement until we get closer to that. Project goals for this are to produce modern, standards-compliant HTML pages, to write valid, well-formed, semantic HTML. I'll start drilling those words today a little bit more so we get clear on what is valid, well-formed, semantic HTML. You'll learn to effectively comment on, format, and lint. We heard this term lint before. Not what you may have found in your belly button before you showered this morning, but lint in a programming context. Of course, none of you found lint in your belly button this morning. Linting, when it comes to programming, what does it talk about? It's very different, very similar to belly button lint. What's that?
From the chapters.
From the chapters, okay, what did the chapters tell you?
They were saying that instead of the old forms of validators, linting would look at not only the correctness of the code, but also compare it to a specific in-house syntax style.
That's right. Okay, so it's about learning to write really good source code that gets you hired because it looks so professional, because it acts so professional, because it's easier for you to return to. Even if it's a project you're the only one who's ever going to look at the source code, you will thank your past self 6 or 8 months from now when you go back and you can actually read what you've done, right? And I mean, we're in the middle of IIT's campus, right? The Cathedral of Modernism is right over there. And now I'm forgetting who wrote this quote that I'm about to drop on you, but it was that when you find errors in form, errors in content, look for errors in form, right? It's the worst thing in the world to debug ugly-looking code that's formatted poorly and spread all over the place. So we'll look at that. So linting source code for maximum readability, and you'll learn to track the development of a project over time using version control if you've never done that before. Okay? So those are the 4 goals of the projects. The actual thing that you're going to be handing over is split up into these 3 deliverables. So first, you will have a Basecamp post showcasing your work in progress. Okay? So you should post the URL to your project 1. Oops, you got a little bit of a problem there. It can be a fresh commit. I'll do that in a second. Project 1, GitHub repository. Include in the text of your post 1 or 2 things you would like feedback on from me and from everybody else in the class. All right? That post is due no later than September 7th. Because you're also going to be giving substantive comments critiquing at least 3 other student projects by the 14th of September. So that gives you a whole week to do the next part, right? And it gives you, or it gives everyone who's never responded to your project a whole week to give you some feedback. And then finally, on September 21st by 11:59 p.m. Central Time, an email to me containing the project's final 2 deliverables, which are a 4 to 5 sentence self-critique memo of your project and your progress in class to this point. Write that in the body of the email, like you do every. Like last year, just about fell. Like I was at my desk at home in my office. It's great. I got Star Wars stuff all over the place, fun things. I fell out of my chair because all of these ITM students started sending me Word documents. Hopefully we'll get some good dramatic thunderclaps in here. That one didn't happen. All right. So just write it in the body of the email. I hate email attachments. Remember the first day, my profane little website. Just write it in the body of the email, because then I'm going to respond to you in the email. Okay. And then the second thing beyond that self-critique memo is just the HTTPS link to your GitHub repository. And we'll look at what those things are today if you've never seen them before. Okay? Clear on the deliverables? Okay. In my own head, all this stuff is crystal clear. So if something's not, please point it out to me and we'll fix it. Okay? Okay, so the requirements for this project. So all source files in UTF-8 or Unicode character encoding with Unix-style line endings, that is LF, in tabbed with spaces, 2 spaces per tab. If you use Atom, Atom out of the box is configured to do this. If you don't use Atom, that's totally cool. Make sure you configure it, especially Windows people. That's the one place where different style line endings show up. And make sure that you're in tabbing with 2 spaces, not actual tab characters. Okay? And don't worry, I will help you get tooled up so you can catch all this stuff before I ever have a chance to. If you use a linter on this project, you're well on your way to like a B+. All right, so the other requirement is that you will write valid, well-formed, semantic HTML5. Okay, projects whose HTML does not validate with the W3C HTML validator will receive a 0-point failing grade. It is literally the easiest thing in the world to validate HTML5. It's so incredibly permissive, so if you don't, you've done things so terribly wrong that you'll fail and then I'll cry for like an hour per student who fails. Okay? In the unlikely event that you discover a validation error or warning that is a genuine bug in the validator, you must acknowledge that bug in the memo that accompanies your project and point to the relevant documentation, such as specifications or an existing reputable bug report that your source is in fact correct. Get in the habit of validating your HTML early before you commit to Git. So, one of the kind of workflow that I'll teach you in here And let me get rid of my gum before I'm sent to the principal's office. The general workflow is you write some code, you validate it, you lint it, you commit it. Okay? We only want to commit good test-passing work. Right? If you're doing some other language, you're writing Ruby or something, maybe you've got RSpec tests or something fancy. Here we've got very primitive, knuckle-dragging kinds of tools like validators and linters, but they're still really good. So that's what I'll teach and demonstrate and ingrain in you in class. Okay? And again, this project has descriptions of a lot of things that we haven't covered yet. It's not like, okay, great, you had that one class where I got through half of the history of HTML. You're totally cool to do all of that. This is the next couple of weeks of class. Okay, only structural semantic uses of HTML elements and attributes. Absolutely no. See, it's in bold face, so it has to be really true and really important. Absolutely no table markup, break tags, or any other use of HTML to achieve a particular page layout. All layout and design will be handled via CSS in the next project. Okay? I'm not even going to look at this project in a browser. I'm going to just be looking at your source code. Because it doesn't matter how it looks because it's just HTML. HTML has absolutely no visual properties of its own. If you try and hammer some kind of design out using HTML, the gods will weep. Okay? So we're not going to worry about design. We're going to worry about valid, well-formed, semantic HTML, which has no visual properties whatsoever. Okay? Because we don't know. The user agent who reads our HTML page could be a screen reader for somebody who's low vision. It could be a braille reader. There's all kinds of different possibilities here. So we're not going to worry at all about visual design this first project. I know it's going to be painful for some of you, but trust me, it's worry enough to get this stuff right without bringing design into it. Okay? So stick close to your source in the HTML validator, and be sure to use the HTML linter, which I will demonstrate in class. If not today, then certainly on Wednesday. You'll need a semantically structured navigation area for accessing each of your project's pages from any other page. Okay. We'll talk about specific semantic structures for navigation. Spoiler, it's a list. Spoiler part 2, it's inside of a tag called nav. You'll include at least one form of media for this project, either an image or an audio or video. Okay? Make use of the figure and fig caption tags. Don't worry, we're going to talk about those too. Okay? But that is the new semantic way that we want to do any kind of media where we're trying to say to somebody, hey, look at this picture, or hey, watch this video, or hey, listen to this sound file. We use a figure element to present that. You will prepare organized, readable source that is handwritten and original, so no WYSIWYGs or code generators, no Bootstrap or other off-the-shelf frameworks. Do we know this acronym is fading from memory? WYSIWYG? Wearing a WYSIWYG? No. WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get. It's a profound lie that software has told since the days of like what's now Adobe InDesign used to be Adobe PageMaker used to be Aldus PageMaker used to be something else. Right? When the first like desktop publishing software came out, the big selling point for that software is what you see is what you get. And that was totally believable and for the most part true because all of that software was outputting to an 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. So what it meant is that what you saw on the screen was what ultimately would get printed out, right? Word makes similar promises this way now. Of course, with the web, your screen, your laptop, that is the least important least important screen for your website, right? The most important screen is the person who's going to hire you, or the person who's going to admit you to graduate school, or the person who is going to look at your site while you're standing in front of them at a job fair, right? What size screen are they going to be using? Literally don't know. Literally cannot know. So any software that says what you see is what you get, who cares? Because the Y in this acronym, WYSIWYG, you don't matter. Everybody else in the world is the one who matters. So we've got to design for this entire range of screens. So software like ancient Microsoft Front Page or Adobe Dreamweaver, we're not using any of that stuff because all it does is lie to you. Okay? Nobody opens up their copy of Dreamweaver to browse the web. Right? And if they don't use that to browse the web, then nobody is ever going to see your page looking like that. Okay? All right. You will write directory-based URLs with the default served index.html file so that you can point to, for example, example.com/resume. Okay? Don't bother your audience by making them write .html. Oh, it's .html, not .html. Let's just get out of the .whatever business when it comes to our end users. Resume. Okay? Either Wednesday or early next week, I will show you how I lay out a web project before I sit down and write a stitch of code. I put everything exactly where it should be. Okay? So that's coming. You need a Git repository with frequent commits and meaningful commit messages that accurately reflect each set of changes that you make. So, you turn projects into most professors, it's just a thing, right? Like, here's this widget I made, and here's the final files. I uploaded them to Blackboard or something perverse like that, right? That tells me so little, right? Okay, good, you made a thing, and you uploaded the files in a place that they'll never go professionally. Good job, right? I like to receive projects in a professional fashion, like in a repository, and I like to see your work in the fourth dimension. I'm much more interested in how you work from commit to commit to commit to commit to make something better than I am giving you a little golf clap because, yay, you used the heading 1 tag, right? I'm interested in the story and the learning and the kind of overall approach that got you there. Okay? So when you do a GitHub repository, I'm not just looking at your head commit. I'm looking at the sum total of everything that you did. Why? Because I like to surveil you? Not really. I like to know that you're thinking about how you craft commits and how you start building those things. Because when you start working in teams of people and you're all using version control together, you will quickly become the most hated person on the team if you suck at writing commits. If you don't know how to write a meaningful commit message that is both meaningful and, ooh, here comes our 10-cent vocab word of the day, veritable. Do we know this word veritable? From the Latin veritas, truth, right? So if I say, added figure elements to all of the images, when I look at the actual source code from that commit, that better be what happened, and not you change the order of your list items in your resume or something like that, right? Okay. See, I know that not everybody in this classroom is planning to go on as a web developer for life, so I give you all these other life lessons that you can use whatever kind of development you want to do. Okay. Do not, here, it's in a second time, so I must really mean it. Do not attempt any visual design in this project. Choose your HTML tags for semantics. We can make any tag look any way that we want. Okay? So the choice to use a heading tag, or a paragraph tag, or a list item tag, or an ordered list, or an unordered list, we can make any of those tags look like any other tags. So that means the choice that we make to use a particular tag comes down to its semantics. That's to say, it comes down to what meaning that tag gives to the content that we're marking up. Okay? So if I do something, like don't write this down, I'm writing it in red. I'm going to try to start writing the stuff that sucks in red. So it's all color-coded. So if we do something like this, wrong, right? Because semantically, what is this tag? Paragraph. Am I looking at a paragraph of text here? Nope. I'm probably looking at something like a heading. Right? So depending on how we structure the overall patterns of the page, this is what we're looking for here. Now, you will be quick to say, but I don't like how the heading 2 looks. It's all Times New Roman and bold and fat and curly. It looks a little bit too much like the instructor in this class. And I'll say, you're right. But we can style it any way that we want. We can even completely hide it from view if this has information that's useful for somebody who can't see the page, right? And might have it read aloud to them instead. So we want to completely separate the presentational layer, okay, which encompasses things like design and even, at least on its surface, encompasses like auditory design, from the semantic structure. The other part about semantics, and I will say this about 10,000 times too, is that semantics are as timeless as anything can get on a website. This will be a heading 2 until the cities are dust and the universe has experienced heat death, right? This will still be a heading. Now, Whether we like it purple or green or in Helvetica or all these other things, that is open to negotiation, right? So when we're writing semantically, we're really thinking about just describing the content that's there. We'll use CSS, we'll use another language to say, and let's make it green, or let's put it on a red background, or let's have it flash until somebody falls out of their chair. Like whatever mean thing you want to do to somebody, right? Okay. So yeah, the next project will add in CSS, which will handle all the visual design features. And finally, your Git repository must contain only the files and commits from this project. Come Wednesday, you're going to get a repository from me that you're going to fork for your weekly production problems. That is just for your weekly production problems. Don't start writing your project in that thing. Okay? Repositories are cheap. Keep them organized, and you'll be a happier person. Okay? Any questions about the project, besides like the vocab and all the stuff that you haven't been exposed to yet? Anyone? I rocked it that hard, not a question in the room.
Oh.
Yes?
For this, are we focusing, do you want us, would it be okay if we made multiple pages for this website, or do you want us to focus on a single page website?
Let's go back to the description. We will create at least 3 richly structured HTML pages. So 3. I would stay close to 3. Don't make 24. Okay.
I won't.
4 if you really gotta. Okay. 3 is what I'm looking for. Okay. Now, what those pages are, I don't know, about me, give me money, hire me. I don't know what you're, like, then that's up to you. Pictures of cats. Whatever it's going to be. Okay? That's your call. Any other questions? Okay. So let's get to it. Right? Remember where we left off? We were looking at this awesome piece of web design here, which, of course, for some reason, when we increase its size, now suddenly we have the dreaded horizontal scroll bar, right? This is like the second biggest sin in all of web design, is having a horizontal scroll. The first bigger sin is, of course, doing this on purpose. Okay? Nobody wants to scroll.
Or making the screen off to the right so that you have space on the left.
Right,
so that you
exactly.
Can scroll.
Yeah. So we'll look at ways to avoid this. This page is from 1997. We'll be forgiving it, right? Okay, who knows what happened. So we were, see, always run git log. I don't know, what were the last 3 commits? So the last commit I did was a more fully realized HTML2 document, and now I realize that you can't read that because it's too small. Okay. So this is another reason why Git is awesome, because I can come back to my work days later after a weekend of partying very hard. I didn't really party hard. I hope you did. Okay? But because of Git, even if I had partied hard, I would know exactly where I left off. And if I can't remember exactly what I meant by fully realized HTML 2.0 document, I can always grab the first 5 or 6 characters from this hash, and I can say git show, and then give it that hash, and it will show me, okay, here was our HTML 1.0 document, right? Which, because this is such a huge number of commits, this looks a little more destructive than it is, but now we can see we added in this doc type here, we added in this root HTML element, we added in this head and body, and we did a little bit of indentation here as well. Okay. All right. So let's open up the old Atom editor. Yes?
In the text document itself, like the physical bytes, do you want it to be a tab character or 2 spaces?
2 spaces.
Okay.
2 actual spaces. Why? I mean, oops.
So I mean, like if you just, for example, went in Vim and then hit space twice instead of changing your tab settings.
You could do that. Or you could just use the tab key like everybody else on the planet and let it do the 2. Because you don't want to have your laptop wear out by the end of the semester. Like, oh my god, he made us use spaces instead of tabs, and now my space key doesn't work. Okay. So, yeah, learn how to set your tabs. And again, you'll get into religious grade arguments with people, tabs versus spaces. Some languages are very serious about their use of tabs. What has happened on the web is that now spaces are pretty much the standard style. And if you don't believe me, that's totally cool. Nothing I give you in here is gospel truth because it came out of my mouth. I know I'm awesome, but I'm not a small god, and I do not give pronouncements of things without having some kind of evidence behind them. So, go, have a look at what Bootstrap does. Have a look at what jQuery does. Have a look at what HTML5 does and the other project that I can't think of off the top of my head. You will see that projects all over the place, with very few exceptions, have adopted 2 spaces per level of indent on all web-bound languages, HTML, JavaScript, and CSS. Can you find examples of projects that use tabs instead of spaces? Absolutely you can. They're in the overwhelming minority. Don't argue with their developers, or you will get into a religious grade discussion about the virtues of them. One of the things that I like about using spaces versus tabs is that spaces are always a single space big. A tab is a variable width character in terms of how much space it occupies. So if you look, for example, at a piece of source code on GitHub in its source view, the tabs will be this wide. And so the second somebody tabs in like 3 times, you're scrolling horizontally to get over to where their code is. Whereas if you use spaces to entab something, it's always going to look more or less readable. Why 2 spaces? Why not 1? Or 3? Or 4? Anybody want to venture to guess why 2 spaces? I mean, we, as human beings, tend to like even numbers for a lot of things. Yes, sir?
Maybe because we double space normal sentences?
Okay, well, yes, that's certainly a common practice. And again, it goes back to that, like, we like things in sets of 2. But here we're thinking just purely horizontally, right? And even Atom is going to jump back and forth across these for me. But 2 spaces is the minimum amount of spaces that you need to tell that something is truly, in fact, indented. 1 space, I don't know, maybe they made a mistake. 3, well, it was already obvious at 2 spaces that it was indented, so you're basically just wasting 8 bits at that point, right? So we don't want to worry about that. Okay, so here we are. So let's just see if we just go and find the new doc type definition. And what's a doc type? It's a recursive question. What is a doc type? This thing that I'm now pasting up here.
A doc type declares the format and specification that the page is going to follow, like HTML to XHTML to...
Right.
Well, not.
Absolutely. But in terms of just, is a doc type, is it a tag? It's a recursive question. A doc type is a doc type. That's what it is. This happens to be what you were saying, which is the more advanced answer. A specific doc type specifically for HTML3 version 3.2. So all I'm going to do is I've just replaced this doc type, and I want to see if this is still valid. If the HTML that was valid for 2.0 happens to still be right for 3.2. So here we can go over to our validator again. We can paste this stuff in. And let's say revalidate. Yay! 2 warnings. 2 warnings. Probably. Do we have 2 warnings on the last one? Of course I lost it. What are the 2 warnings? Okay, no character encoding. I'm glad this one happened. Okay, so no character encoding occurred at the document level. And then the second one is related to the first. It says it's using direct input mode, UTF-8 character encoding SU. Okay? So, here's a tutorial on character encoding for techniques and explanations. Let's see where they point us. Ooh. In a nutshell. Okay, so this is the modern way. We're not there yet. We're stuck in HTML 3.2. So, in the old days, back when the earth was still cooling, and I was in college writing my very first website on Netscape Composer, we had to use this ugly little thing that was a meta element. And it had a property called HTTP equib. Okay? Whoop. HTTP equib. Does everybody know where that comes from? Well, just that property name. HTTP quiz. So when, here, let's go ahead and do a couple of things here.
Just specify what the next tag is going to be.
Well,
I remember it was saying that it was replaced.
so here I'm opening up a server, and I'm going to do what I did last time, except now I'm going to do, I think I did this in this class. Did I do this in this class? Where we did a full, okay, I'm teaching another web design class, so this is not the first time this is going to happen. So here's what I'm going to do. I am going to simulate what my browser does when I request a page, except here I'm using a command line tool called curl, aka curl, and I'm giving it, right, so this is a command line application, so we can say that the command I'm using is curl. We're giving it a flag, which is -v, which on almost any command line utility on the planet, V means verbose, and if English is not your first language, or you just slept through that part of English class in the 7th grade, verbose means really wordy, right? I'm verbose. People write it in letters about me. It's great. Okay? Verbose. So that means don't do anything behind the scenes. Talk us through what you're doing all the way along. So here I'm saying curl. I want to request this this page here at HTTP localhost port 8080, and curl's like, cool, I got you. Okay? So here is the entire HTTP stack at work. This is awesome, right? Like you have your little browser on your Android phone or your iPhone or your desktop or your tablet, and we like to think that it's like, here's the part where it renders the page, and here's the address bar. It's all just a big lie, right? We say, okay, we're going to try : 1, which of course is the IPv6 addressing, okay? And it looks like it failed to do that, right? So now it's going to try to connect to : 1, port 80, fail, okay? So that means it's not listening on my IPv6 address, but here we're going to try good old 127.0.0.1, which is an IPv4 address. Okay? Boom! Sets up the node here, and now we're connected to localhost, aka 127.0.0.1. Right? Everybody seen 127.0.0.1 before? What does 127.0.1? Well, I can't say all the zeros.
It's your home address.
It's your home address. What do you mean?
Like the root?
You've got the concept down. There's one particular vocab word that we're looking for. Everybody can hit 127.0.0.1 when you're sitting on your computer because it is your home address, right? There's that meme going around like, what's your address? No, what's your local address? 127.0.0.1. No, what's your physical address? And then he gets him a MAC address, right? When the person's asking for postal address. Cooper?
Loopback.
Local loopback. Okay? So this is a reserved address on every machine that talks in TCP/IP standard. So you can go to my office over in Stiegel Hall, and I have a bumper sticker on my door that says there's no place like 127.0.0.1, which of course is a play on The Wizard of Oz. There's no place like home. There you go. Okay, so now we've actually established a connection. So now our browser, in this case curl, is going to make a request. It says, hey, get whatever is at / right? And use the HTTP 1.1 protocol to get it, please. Oh, and by the way, let me introduce myself. I am asking for host, localhost 8080. And here's me. I am user agent curl version 7.54.0. And I will accept anything. Okay? Ideally, I would like... Gotta use blue here. I would like a text /HTML type document. Do we know what this */ pattern or text /HTML or image, speaking of cats, /GIF, what these little patterns are with something and a slash and then something else, or in this case */*? This is an ad hoc international standard. Diana MIME types. And here we can probably get a really good list of them off. Oh, okay, we're coming up first. Okay, so the Internet Assigned Numbers Authority. We've heard of these people before? They're another old group. Okay, so they maintain their own set of RFCs. This one was last updated very recently, right? 2017-823, so August 23rd of 2017, so like last week. Okay, So here are all the possible wacky things that you could send across a network, right? So if we look for GIF, of course it's not on here. Oh, it's right here. Okay. Image GIF. I don't know why they're not listing it here. Just to make my life a little bit miserable. Here, it's better older sibling, image/ping for a ping image, right? So we have these something/something. So most of the time we're giving what is sort of the base quality of this thing. Is it an image? Is it an application? Is it text? And then we give a more specific listing of what specific file type we're passing down. Okay? Why put this information into play? Who cares? It's just a browser. Has anybody ever gone to a website, possibly at this university, where you get something like index.php and then some big query string? I don't know what it is. And rather than drawing a nice page for you in the viewport, it downloads a file.
Oh.
Have you had that before? It's happening. Like if you live in the state of Illinois, and or if you deal with IIT, like eventually you're going to come across a misconfigured web server like this. Okay? Usually what that is, that's a misconfigured MIME type. And so the browser's like, whoa, I don't know how to render PHP files, so I will just download this for you, and you can do whatever you want with it. Okay? So back to our terminal here where we're making this web request, right? We're saying we'll accept anything, whatever resource you have at slash. If it's an HTML file, if it's an animated GIF of a cat, if it's a guy smashing another guy's head over and over for all of eternity, we'll take it. Okay? So this is our request. Okay? The other side of request architecture is a response. And so now, and we can tell because the arrows are pointing the other direction, now we have the server responding. It's like HTTP 1.1, no problem. Literally okay.
Ecstatic.
200. What's that?
Ecstatic.
Yeah, that's what this little HTTP server on Node is called. It's called ecstatic, right? Ordinarily, this would say Apache or Nginx or something sexy like that, but here we're just using this little one. We get a last modified date on what we're setting down. We get this E tag, which is, I don't know. We'd have to look it up. We have cache control here. It says this should last as long as 3,600 seconds. Here's our content link. So it's already reporting to us, like, get ready. Here comes 214 bytes of what? Content type, text HTML, character set UTF-8. So what are these pieces of the response called? Starts with the letter H, rhymes with headers. Headers! Very good. So we can configure a web server to send down various types of headers, including things like when the server detects a .htm or .html or hopefully .php file, send that thing as text HTML. And oh, by the way, specify that the character set is, in this case, UTF-8. So taking it way back, well, let's go down, because this is awesome, right? So we say, and then here's the date of our response, and we're going to try to keep this connection alive, and then boom, here's my HTML. Right? There's no magic to it. There's no big theater. And now, drum roll, here comes the... No, it's all one huge stream of plain text. Okay? Our browser is smart enough to strip out these headers and things and put them in different... You know, we can go view page info and stuff like that. It'll give us information out of the headers. Right? And then it takes this chunk, which is the actual body of our request, or rather body of the response, and this is what gets then rendered in our web page. This is so awesome. You should be falling out of your chairs. I don't know why falling out of your chair is like my thing. It is. Okay? This is awesome. That's it. This is what we're doing this semester. Passing fancy strings of text around and hoping that the right device is going to catch it and render it and make it pretty. Okay? All right, so connection to 0 to localhost is left intact. And by the way, if I go over to my server, I can actually see a little one-line sad log of when this request came in. So here's my actual little server is running, and at 15:41 GMT, which stands for what?
Greenwich Mean Time?
Yep. Greenwich Mean Time, aka UTC time, Universal Time Coordinates, the time at the prime meridian, minus 500 hours. Because because that's our time zone offset during Central Daylight Time. When we get to October, no, it's November now. We become Central Standard Time and it becomes what? 600 hours, right? Okay. So this is a universal time coordinate here. It's trying to give us Central Daylight Time. And then we're saying somebody asked for get. And the person asking for it, or rather their user agent, was curl version 7.54.0. Okay, just like that. Okay, so if we go back to our request, we have this content type, text HTML, semicolon, character set UTF-8. We can actually just copy and paste that into this little attribute here. So we have an HTTP equiv. So what is it equiv to? It's equiv to this content type, text HTML over here, and setting the character set as UTF-8. So here we're going to actually specify this, and I did this wrong because we don't want to replicate this part. So here's we're saying we're going to set the content type equivalent HTTP header, but here we're going to do it right in the body of the HTML itself, right? People did this because, of course, in the 1990s, when the world was still cooling, jerks ran web servers, and jerks often misconfigured their servers, and so they wrote like, oh, everything that comes off this server is going to be encoded as Windows 1252 or something like that. So you could override this, at least in theory, by writing this big, long, ugly meta tag here. Okay, so let me save that. And now I'm going to go back. Let's copy this whole thing and see if we can't get that little ugly warning to go away in Validator. Okay, so now we've got our 3.2 doc type up here. We've got our meta HTTP equivalent header element here. And there's the rest of our page. So if I say revalidate this for me, please, we should have only one warning. And that warning is due to using direct input mode. So if I want to go through the whole rigmarole here, if I want to go through and say, okay, go back to the validator home page, and let's actually upload our file. Okay. And let's go to my little shortcut. Here's our index file, so I'm going to open this thing, and I'm going to check it, and now I should have a true, warning-free, error-free HTML 3.2 document. Just like that. It passed. There's no warnings because we actually uploaded the text file so the validator could check to see that we weren't lying in that meta tag to say, oh yeah, we're totally using UTF-8, I think. Right? Now it can actually look at what Adam allows us to do, which is to go down to this lower corner and see that, yes, we are using LF. We are using UTF-8, right? This is half the requirements of the first line of your project requirements. Are you using line feet? Are you using UTF-8? Good. Okay. So this is good. If we go back now over to yet another specification. Now we're getting actually more into the contemporary era of the web. We look for doc type. And of course, they're not going to put it on one page anymore and make my life a living hell. Let's just ask for it. HTML 4.01 doc type. Okay, see? Stupid W3 schools sandbagging the damn Google results. Okay, here we go. So, chapter 21 of the HTML 4.01 specification. So we started with a little document for HTML 1.0 that nobody could find anymore called HTML tags, to 2.0, which was an RFC, to 3.2, which was just one long web page, to now something that's broken up into 21 chapters. So the specification got more involved, it got more precise. Okay? So now we get some interesting things, and this is actually a little bit of backform history. Okay. So we're going to just use this thing. Doc type HTML 4.01, and specifically we're referencing a URL here that talks about something called strict. Strict isn't going to make a whole lot of sense here, but let's go ahead and run with it. Oh wait, we got to make a commit first. In fact, I think we need to make 2 commits. So let's look at one other thing that I'll show you more and more over the course of the semester. So if I do git, what's my command to figure out what has changed in my file?
Status.
Okay, well I can say git status. It will tell me which file has changed. But if I want to see the actual lines that have changed, remember the D rhymes with if. Diff. Git diff. Okay, so I have two changed lines here, right? Here's my old doc type for 2.0. Here's where I added 3.2. And here's where I've added this meta tag to specify the content and the character encoding. To my line of thinking, these are two different pieces of the puzzle, right? I might decide at some point I'm not going to actually use this doc type, but this might actually hang around for a little bit longer. Okay? So I'm going to use git in a very fancy mode. Git add patch. Okay, so before we would say git add, and it would just add the whole contents of that index file. Everything we did. Now I'm saying, hey, take us into patch mode. All right? Then it asks, stage this hunk. Why, thank you, Git. I am pretty handsome. Okay? No, stage this hunk, meaning this hunk of the file here. Okay? But right now, it's one hunk. We want to split this thing so we can actually, if we didn't know, we could always type the question mark. I don't want to dwell on this too much today, but I'm going to say, hey, can you split this? And it'll say, sure. And now it says split into two hunks. And look, here is hunk number 1. Okay? Of course, I can't see to the bottom of my terminal, but it asks me down here where it's cut off, stage this hunk. Yes, I want to stage this hunk because I want to make a commit that is just this one change. So I say yes. Stage it. Do I want to stage that hunk? No, I do not. Okay? So now if I run git status, I'm in this weird parallel universe where everything is crazy because on the one hand, I have changes being reported as not staged for commit, same file as this one that says that there are changes that have been staged for commit. And if I want to, I can always see what are the unstaged changes. And now I'll see the only thing that's not staged is this. So beautiful. So now I can write a couple of meaningful commits. Add, I'll just do it on the command line. Add HTML 3.2 doc type. Okay? Beautiful. If I do git status again, still have this other part. If I do git diff, I've got this one line. I could go into patch mode, but that's redundant because now the whole file has the changes that I want. So I can say, that's why it's clicked. It's off the screen. Okay. So now I can say git add dot, and now I can say git commit m, add meta tag with HTTP content type with, that's okay. Okay? Hurrah. Got my special commits all set up. So now if I do git log -2, you can see these last two commits. Even though I made those changes at the same time, to the outside world, I'm an exceptionally organized person who very carefully changed the doc type and then added that HTTP equiv. Okay. So now we're going to paste in this new doc type for HTML 4.01 strict. Okay. And now let's see what happens if we go over to our validator. And I'm going to just, no, I want to just go to validator. Okay, let me just do direct input again so I can check it. So I'm going to check this thing. And it tells me that this document was successfully checked as HTML 4.01 strict. Okay? I'm going to talk about strict, but I want to wait for one moment. Okay? We've got one warning, which is just because we did the copy-paste here, right? Getting this direct input mode thing. So the warning is not really warning us about our file, the validator warning us about itself. So this was good. For the longest time, people wrote HTML 4.01. Specifically, they wrote HTML 4.01 for the better part of 15 years, right? There was one little step cousin language that was approved during this time, and it came from a different little cousin language that was called XML. Okay? And XML much like HTML before it, was derived from the older SGML specification. So XML doesn't look a whole lot different from SGML. But, whereas SGML is a total slob, he is, in the world of friends, he's more of a Joey. XML is more like a Ross on a good day. Everything has to be just so. Okay? So, when we talk about these strict settings, and with HTML 4.01 and even HTML5, there is no HTML5 strict. Strictness is kind of a lie. Okay? So, what we got was XML plus HTML is equal to XHTML 1.0. What XHTML was, and what was that joke in Jeremy Keith's book where you had to say XHTML, you had to cross your hands in front of yourself, say XHTML? No, it's not true. What XHTML was the HTML 4.01 tag set, elements in those things, rewritten according to the stricter rules of XML. Okay? So, if I decide to go and find another specification, because you know I love specifications, let's find XHTML 1.0 from 2000 or 2002. I don't think they've got the doc type out here. Of course they do. Keep the irregularities inconsistent. So there were 3 doc types. Right? See, I told you XML was kind of like high maintenance boyfriend or girlfriend. 3 different possible doc types in XHTML. Starting from the bottom, frame set. Okay, not going to do frame sets anymore. Okay, but there was a frame set, DTD. Okay. Then there was this transitional doc type, and then there was one called strict. Okay. Transitional was like, I want to be standards compliant. I want to follow the actual documents for HTML, but I'm using some legacy tooling in my system, or I've just got some legacy developers who don't know what they're doing. So you could write in the XHTML transitional doc type. Transitional was more like aspirational. Like, I really want to comply with your standards, but I can't. And browsers, does anybody know what a browser does with these wacky document type definitions? Okay. In the old days, HTML1, that first thing that I wrote, that renders in what's known as quirks mode in all browsers. It means like, oh God, this person doesn't even have a doc type declaration in this document. It's probably like some soccer coach someplace who did save his HTML in Word or something like that. Let's just render this thing like it's 1992 because his software probably still thinks this. Okay. Then we had what was like called, oh, that's good, dramatic. Poorly timed with what I was saying. Okay. Then we had what was called standards compliance mode, and then we would have the fun bit. Okay. Standards compliance mode, which was the browser would say, oh man, look, it's a doc type. This person probably knows what they're doing because they actually inserted this thing into their work. And it went further in XHTML to say, okay, is it transitional or is it strict? If it was transitional, it was mostly standards compliant. There were still some quirks that were rendered. If it was strict, it was like, okay, this person wants to play hardball. Like, they're going to be super careful with everything that they write, so we should throw them lots of errors, at least in the validator. And when it comes to rendering this page in the browser, let's render this like they really know what they're doing. Okay? So, let's quickly make another commit here. All we did on this current one is we put in that 4.01 strict, and I hate the formatting on that, so let me change it. Specifically the second line, let's do 2 spaces of indent. That was probably in tabbed as tabs, and it would knock it over like that. Okay. Again, use your git diffs and review what you're committing. That was the point at which I decided this was unacceptable. Okay? So long as we haven't committed it, we can still change it. Okay, so now one more time with feeling. If I do git diff, there we go, much better. 2 spaces. So now we can say git add dot. We can just steal from this old commit, 4.01 strict, doc type. That's probably going to throw an error. Okay, it was fine with it's the exclamation mark that'll kill you. Okay, so yeah, it's kind of strict, but that wacky code that we've basically had around since version HTML2 still blew right through the validators. Like, yeah, that's totally valid. I accept that. So now, if we go to this unfriendly sounding XHTML strict. Okay, HTML strict is like strict the way like, yeah, I'm a strict uncle. And then he like buys you beer. Okay, so here let's put our XHTML strict doc type in here. Just like that. And now we're going to see me quit the application when I meant to say Control S. That's okay. There we go. Okay, so we've got our XHTML strict document type. So now when I go over to the validator, right? See this nice, pretty green valid HTML 4.01 strict? Remember that. Revalidate. Boom! Suddenly everything is not okay. We have 9 errors, right? A second ago with HTML 4.01, we had 0 errors. We change over to XHTML, we've got 9 errors. You can see why lots of people recoiled in horror from XHTML strict, because it meant they were doing everything wrong. Okay? Let's see what these errors are, and if there's any hope for us. Okay? Element HTML undefined. Okay? Element head undefined. I think I'm seeing a pattern. Element title undefined. Okay? End tag for meta omitted, but omit tag no was specified, so it's freaking out about that. Okay, that's okay. Body undefined, H1 undefined. So every single tag that I have used here is undefined. Okay, this goes back to our little weaselly cousin XML. In SGML, let me write it. In SGML, you could write a paragraph as capital P, or you could write it as lowercase p. SGML was case insensitive. It did not care. XML very much cares. And XML, and particularly XHTML, recognizes this. Yes, there is an element called P. The second we capitalize it, XML is going to be like, I've never seen that before. I don't know who that is. I don't know what to do with it. Okay? So one of the things that we got from XHTML that I love, and that informs our class style, and that is the hallmark of an informed web developer everywhere, is that now we've got to write our elements in lowercase. Okay? I'm sure there's a shortcut that I could be doing that would do this for me without me retyping all of it, but I don't want to look it up. Meta, that one was okay. We mixed that. Okay? So head and body. Okay, so this you can start writing down in terms of style. Lowercase, all lowercase tags. P, now I'm going to just let this P slide. I don't think we're out of the woods yet. And now HTML. Okay, so we did that work, but let's check with the validator because we got it really mad. Let's see if this is cool. All right, so I pasted it in. The only thing I've done is go through and make everything lowercase. Revalidate. Still mad, but at least it says 3 errors instead of 9, okay? This is the workflow that you will work through all semester long. You will start with 27 errors and you will get it down to 24 and you'll be so happy, and then you'll get it down to 22, and then 10, and then you'll discover that the 9th error was responsible for the other 8, and then you'll be done, okay? So we've got 3 errors here, so let's see what errors we still have. Okay, we're missing the XMLNS attribute for element HTML. The value should be w3.org 1999 XHTML. So this was a short-lived feature. The idea behind the original XML. By the way, does anybody know what XML was being used for hardcore around this time besides XHTML? RSS feeds. People don't even really know what they are anymore, but this allowed you to syndicate your blog content all over the web. Okay? And whereas HTML before allowed us, and I didn't demonstrate this because we just ran out of time, but HTML gave you attributes where you could set colors on things. XML, besides being worried about case, also said XML, extensible markup language, is purely about semantic structure. Don't tell me what color the background is in XHTML. Tell me in CSS. Okay. So we have to add this XML namespace. And what this was supposed to do, it never really got off the ground like most things around XML, but we never, the idea was you could bring in multiple different XML vocabularies and they would all hold hands and sing Kumbaya, and we would change the world together. It never happened. But this was required for XHTML strict, was this little namespace tag here. Okay, so let's put that in, and let's just go like I do. When I get a bunch of errors, I don't panic, I fix the first one, because you never know if the thing is going to snowball. Revalidate. 2 errors. Okay, well we did fix that one. So now if I look, end tag for meta omitted, but omit tag no was specified. Okay? So here we can just read. You may have neglected to close an element, or perhaps you meant to self-close an element, that is ending it with /caret instead of just caret. Okay? So this is XML style and HTML style, right? We have an opening tag called title. We close it a little bit later called title. There are certain elements in HTML, or specifically in XHTML, that are called void elements. Things like the break tag or the horizontal rule tag, that you're not allowed to use either of those things. But the meta tag itself is known as a void element. It's called a void element because unlike the title tag, there is no content inside of it. Okay? We do all of our content as HTML attributes here. So, to make the validator happy, all I have to do is follow its kindly advice and put this slash in here. Okay? I know that's tiny. Let me put it in over here. Let me belabor it. So we went from this to this, and now that is how you do a void or self-closing element in XML. That should be how we could do it. We could be able to move on with our day. The problem is that if you open this in Internet Explorer prior to version 9, it freaks out, it wets its pants, it brings shame to its family, because when Internet Explorer encounters a closing quotation mark followed immediately by a slash, which, by the way, that is to specification. XML permits that, XHTML permits it, Internet Explorer has a huge problem with it. So what we have to do, even unto this day, if we're going to be maximally accessible to every device on the planet, is we have to put an extra space in there. Because now when Internet Explorer gets this, it's like, oh, there's a space here, I guess the tag's done. See everybody at lunch. Okay, that's Internet Explorer. Okay, it becomes the bane of your existence. It's gotten better, but we still don't know what company internet portal still runs on IE6 or, God forbid, IE5 yet. So we still have to do these little gestures.
One day, there will be no person in the world that uses Internet Explorer.
Today is not that day. I heard somebody arguing in the library with a librarian. I'm faculty at this university. I deserve to use Internet Explorer. Rock on, okay? It's like going to McDonald's. I deserve to eat my hamburger out of a styrofoam container. Because I'm an American. Okay. So there we go. So let's save this, and let's try again with our delicate little XML. Has to have everything just right. Okay. So we'll dump this revised version in with our little self-closing tag. There it is. Right here. Okay, and then we revalidate. Oh, we're so close! Okay. One error. One warning. Okay, end tag for P omitted, but omit tag no was specified. So if you are going to P in XHTML, you have to close your P. That's gross. Okay, so for the longest time, for a good 10 years, we got away without closing our paragraph tags. XML, with its very specific, very strict rule set, says if a tag opens, it must close. If a tag is like meta or like break, it must self-close. Okay? So the nice thing about XML, right, despite all these warnings and everything we've been trying to work around, it is a very internally consistent rule set. Older versions of HTML kind of just let you do whatever. And browsers would really work hard to render the page the way that you thought it was going to be rendered. Okay? XML comes along and says, let's actually get this under control. Let's not say, oh, you don't have to close p tags or list item tags. Everything has to close. All right, so one more time with feeling. If we go ahead and dump this thing into our validator. Yes! Okay, that's an achievement. Getting an XHTML 1.0 strict document to validate is an achievement. Now, there's another little lie that's being told here with this XHTML file, and since we've got 10 minutes and probably won't get too much further, I will do this little roundabout. There is another specification, not linked to from the syllabus, but should you encounter this in the restricted section, I don't know. Hey, why didn't he mention this? Must be a Horcrux. Okay, XHTML 1.1. Does anybody know anything about XHTML 1.0? This is 1.0. 1.1. There's one very specific application where XHTML 1.1 is the hero, it's the star, everybody has to use it. There's a standard for ebooks called EPUB. EPUB ebooks use the XHTML 1.1 standard. XHTML 1.1, unlike its little 1.0 brother, opens with the XML preamble. I'm trying to remember exactly how this goes. I think it looks something like this. I should probably be writing this in red because I'm wrong. Okay. It's not PHP tags, and it looks like it. But you have to open with this XML preamble. Okay. We should have been able to do that with XHTML strict. And by the way, if we had done that, instead of serving our pages as text HTML, we would serve it as content application XML. Because all uses of XML are supposed to be known as XML applications. But in order to do that, we would have to use this XML preamble. And in order to do that, we would have to have all browsers in the universe understand what to do when they encountered this XML preamble. I'll let you guess which browser would freak out, forget who it was for a half an hour, you'd find it laying in your driveway when it came across the XML preamble. That's right, it was Internet Explorer. Would completely go to pieces over this. Okay? So that meant that we couldn't use it. So that meant that XHTML strict, we had to keep serving it as text HTML. And so it never was, despite its very strict rule set, it never truly was XML. Okay? All right, let's make a commit because we did a whole bunch of stuff here. Okay. In fact, we did so much stuff. Let me see if my little shorthand even highlights. Okay, there we go. So I'll show you the little alias I do for this. So here we can see more of a word-by-word view of what it changed, although I've got some things wrong here. But basically, we changed these uppercase tags to lowercase. We corrected this self-closing P and that self-closing meta tag here. Okay? That's an ugly diff. All right. Make exit.
Did you make an alias for get down?
Yes, I've got my own set of Git things. But forgive me, yeah, like Gits. I don't type Git status at home, I type Gits. I'll post some list of these someplace. Although I promise to do that every year, and I never do it, and so it's kind of becoming my things. Like, I'll post my aliases, and then I don't. Like, there's some kind of top secret thing. But seriously, if you use Git all the time, you don't want to type Git status. Okay. Git diff. Ooh, I broke something. You can't run diff highlight. That's going to be a problem here in a second. Funny. Broke something. Okay, that's all right. Let's do... add XHTML 1.0 strict BTD fixes. Okay, so getM is my shorthand for git commit -m. Okay. Just like that. Okay, so here's what happens. Here's the alternate history that doesn't come to pass. So the academic nerds at the W3C writing these specifications are totally in love with XHTML 1.1. They're totally in love with their cleverness, and so they begin work on a new draft version of XHTML 2.0. And they get very excited about this. And one of the early design decisions that they decided is, you know what? Screw all those tags from HTML. Who needs heading tags? Who needs paragraph tags? We'll just have like tags that are completely semantic based on where they're nested and whatever wacky thing we have. So they started working on XHTML2, and it would have broken the web because it was 100% not backward compatible. Okay? And so not a small amount of web developers looking at a good 20-odd years worth of HTML said, you're not going to suddenly make this obsolete and not backward compatible. So the organizational structure inside the W3C is something called a working group, or a WG for short. So a group of disgruntled developers who had spent the better part of the late 1990s and early 2000s learning XHTML strict, trying to write to the standards, trying to lobby browser makers at Netscape and Internet Explorer to actually follow the standards, which they had never done, right? Netscape and Microsoft both had people in the working groups for HTML, for JavaScript, for CSS. They went back home, and their engineers completely ignored and oftentimes did the opposite of what the specification that they had helped and that the company had paid for, right? So this new beast was formed called the Web Hypertext Application, I'm forgetting the exact expansion, but this rogue group of developers outside of the W3C started this thing called WhatWG, which is like what working group, like screw working groups, like they're bad ideas. And they began work on a specification called HTML5. And the idea behind HTML5 was that it would be completely backward compatible. In fact, you could go and find that HTML 1.0 document laying around, and that was valid HTML5, okay, which is why the validator is so easy to please. So let's change this document around, and let's make our XHTML HTML5. Okay, so the first thing we do, all of this crazy nonsense that you have to look up and copy and paste, gone. That's our doc type. For HTML5, for HTML6, and everything that comes into the future. Now, this is not arrogant. This is pragmatic. Okay? Remember that quirks mode doc type switching I was telling you about? Turns out this is all that a browser looks for to decide whether to turn on quirks mode or not. So if that's all the browser looks for, that's our doc type. Okay, so this will make sure that we render in standards compliant mode when we write HTML5. This wacky XML namespace, well, it's HTML5. It's not really XML, and who cares? This was always kind of just a little piece of theater, a little ceremony that nobody cared about, right? I don't like languages that do that. Sorry, Java users with your void int main thing. Like, I just want to write hello world. Don't make me write 9 lines of code on either side of that. Okay? I like code that gets down to work. Okay? That doc type, HTML, very specific work. Triggers standards compliance mode. Now, our HTML should have something else in a globalized world, which is this lang element. This is not required in HTML5, although our house-style linter will use this. We want to say what natural human language this page is rendered in. If we're writing in Spanish, then we want to put ES. If we're writing in German, we want to put DE. Right? Do we know these codes, 2-letter country codes? Good international standard, as you might remember from first grade, ISO 630-2. 2-letter country codes, and there's 3-letter ones too. And technically, we should probably even evolve and do the 4-letter ENUS, but I'm going to just stick with the simple, old-school language EN. Okay? Now, this ugly, horrible thing that we lived with for years and years, this gets completely shredded, and now we have this happy little thing that looks like this. Meta character set UTF-8. That's the only thing that mattered in that whole string. I mean, can you imagine this? Every HTML document on the planet announcing in a tag that it was, in fact, HTML. That's what this old thing does, right? Like, I'm HTML. I know, I can see. I'm looking at you. You don't need to tell us. Okay? Now, in XML, and we're writing, not XHTML strict in here, we're going to write HTML5, but we're going to write it in strict style so that when XHTML5 or something like that comes out, we're ready. Okay? Just like our element names for the tags, like meta here are lowercase, so too are all of our HTML attribute names. So in this case, we have an attribute called charset. This is the only tag on which we use charset. Okay? We immediately write an equals sign. Okay? And then immediately after that, we write a double quotation mark that has our value. In this case, we're saying character set's value is UTF-8. Okay? And that is pretty much that in terms of getting to valid HTML5. We don't have the responsive part in place, but with that, and just as a parting gift to you before you start scraping and moving around, let's put this in. Let's revalidate. Ooh! Look, we're in the new HTML checker. Like, things got I know, it's like new metal. It's like Korn plays if you have speakers. Okay? And this will tell us that our document checking was completed, no errors or warnings to show. One more thing I'm going to do real quick before you go is to say that validating this HTML5 is like the easiest thing in the world. Like, you have to do some really seriously horrible mistakes in order to piss off the HTML validator. So what we're going to do is we're also going to lint our files. And in this case, I'm going to run through a linter, and it says, ooh, it can't find the lint.rc file. That's right, because I didn't put it on here. Hold on one second. Piano music. Okay, to here. Here we go, HTML lint. Yes, 0 errors on one file. So now I can actually go and make my commit. Valid HTML5 in XHTML 1.0 strict style. Cool. We'll pick it up there Wednesday. Say it again. That's it. Oh, okay. Thank you.